Hello out there, and the knife in front of you today is one that I am very excited about because it is a new for 2021 CRKT. This is called the Lanny, and the Lanny was supplied to the channel via the Apex Passaround group, so I am checking this knife out and then passing it along to the next person to review, and I'm really thankful for this opportunity, guys. This year especially, there's a lot of knives that I am going to be able to get my hands on that otherwise I just wouldn't be purchasing, as I'm trying to slim down some stuff in my collection, not trying to buy as many knives as I did in the past. And so the Passaround group is really going to help me, keep abreast of things that are relevant and going on in the community. So yeah, really excited to get my hands on this one. And when it comes to CRKT knives, guys, I get a little bit nervous every time I unbox one. I've got to be honest. I like the company so much, and I really want them to do well, and I don't shy away from being negative when there's something about them that I don't care for or that I think they miss on. And so there is a little bit of like apprehension every time I open a box with a CRKT knife in it. And I've got to tell you, I'm really, really relieved and pumped because there are so many things about this knife that I really like. Certainly there are some things that are drawbacks that people are gonna sort of knock on, and they're all the usual things. And so if you don't like those aspects of the things that CRKT does, then you probably shouldn't be watching the video anyway. But as it is, we're gonna go through them. We're gonna talk about all the pros and cons, a lot more pros than cons on this knife though. That is for sure. I also do have a lot of other CRKT stuff on the way, so definitely stay posted with what's going on the channel if you are interested in that. I have a 10 things you need to know video in the works about this brand new Tuedo that is from Jesper Voxnes. So yeah, that one will be coming soon. But today we're going to do a quick overview of this Lanny, a very, very impressive looking knife designed by Liang Ma. All right, so getting it lined up and taking a look at the size of it, what we have is a cutting edge that is about 3¼ inches long, and then an overall length that is right around 7.5. So if we do some comparisons, here's a good look at the PM2, very similar cutting edge, and then that overall length for the PM2, as always, is longer. Let's bring that Tuedo, hopefully I'm saying it right. Every year, CRKT and Kershaw, for that matter, they stump me with some of the pronunciations. And these two knives are actually pretty comparable in a lot of dimensions. So for EDC use, I'm going to be bringing the Tuedo back into this video, most likely. And when I do this video, I'm going to have the Lanny in there as well, just because there's a lot of comparisons to be made. Another one from 2021 from CRKT is the Heron, with my customized scale, so you can see the difference there. And the best comparison that I could find just right off the bat is actually the Domino. The Spyderco Domino has a very, very comparable size overall. And actually one more that's on the table that I didn't think about at first, but since it's here, here's the Benchmade Mini Presidio 2. All right, so that's about what we're looking at in terms of dimensions, and actually, as far as thickness too, really not that far off from the Mini Presidio 2. All right, so let's talk about the Lanny. Let's talk about some of the things that I really like about it, and some of, all the details, let's say, that you need to know. So first things first, the blade is just awesome looking. I really like the blade. It is 8CR13 MOV, so that's the thing that a lot of people are just gonna rip on and whatever. I mean, if that's what you want to do and that's what you hate, then you probably shouldn't even be watching videos from CRKT. Like it just shouldn't apply to you. They do a lot of stuff with 8CR. I have said time and time again that I think 8CR is a perfectly fine steel, and for EDC use, it's gonna get the job done. So is it the best thing on the market? Nope, but like, I don't really think that it matters all that much. All right, but when we're looking at the blade, you can't see a difference in the steel versus any other steel. So what we're looking at, though, is a really beautiful grind here. I really like the way that it's flat and a little bit more robust at the tip. So not that you want to pry with this knife at all, but it just does have a little bit more durability as you get down towards that tip. And then feels like a hollow grind right here as well, which is pretty darn nice. So you can see the blade stock is pretty thick, nice jimping that we'll get back to in just a second. but it does end up terminating in a pretty thin cutting edge, which is very, very nice. A little bit of like a fuller here, which is really just for show. When we get into the opening, you can sort of dig in and open the knife that way, but I don't know who would. But just overall, yeah, I'm a big fan of just the way that the finish pops and just the overall look of this blade. All right, as we move to the top, let's take a look at this jimping. So there's a heck of a lot of jimps on this knife right here. And I like that. I always wonder why we don't get more jimping, and that's one of the things that, it's always like, this is a great knife, and while it doesn't always hinder performance and it's not always that big of a deal, when it's there, it's fantastic. It's not the most thumb-grabbing jimping, but there's so much of it and it's comfortable to the extent that the knife feels really good regardless. And it's a good thing that we have that much, because when we move on back and talk about the scales, there is just a little bit of slickness here on this aluminum frame. All right, so now let's move on back and talk about that. And now let's hear from our hypothetical sponsor of the day. Guys, have you ever been in a situation where you had to do some kind of task that was really grueling and strenuous? Something like bringing the groceries in from the car by yourself, or listening to your wife talk about her day? After those tough times, you need something to replenish your body. You need a pick-me-up. And the problem with sports drinks these days is that they're just too darn sweet. When you drink a full-flavored Gatorade, you can feel the diabetes seeping into your bloodstream and just damaging you. Sure, you're getting the electrolytes, but at what price? At what cost? So you need something that's just a little bit healthier for you, a little bit less calories, less sugar. And the problem with stuff like this is that there's zero flavor at all. It tastes fake. The zero stuff is for zeros. So what we have now, something new, something better, G2 lower sugar Gatorade, thirst quencher, still packs all the electrolytes you need, doesn't feel like diabetes in a bottle, it gets that great flavor without too much sugariness. So what is the scientific process that led them to figure out a formula like this? Now, haters might say that it's just adding water to the regular Gatorade formula. I don't like to look at it that way, guys. I like to think that it is an H2O supplemented Gatorade, and that you're not wasting your money by just buying something where you could just add water to something that's pre-existing and get twice the product for half the price. I don't believe that at all. I think that there's something great here, even if it is just H2O infused Gatorade, to sort of mellow it out and make it a little bit more agreeable to the palate and keep you from getting diabetes quite so fast. So that's my take on it, guys. A great new product that I enjoy and I sure do drink the shit out of. So the aluminum frame is super attractive. It's the first thing that jumps out. We've got this like pockmark pattern. I'm not sure exactly what you would call it. I've done some mods that had this sort of look. Obviously not quite as clean as this, but it's just super attractive. So little bit of maybe a powder coating, but it is a little bit slicker than you would want. So it's good to have all these points of contact, and it's definitely good that you have the flipper and the jimping to sort of lock yourself in. Yeah. Feels pretty good in the hand. Maybe just a little bit slick, but for hands my size, medium to smaller, it's not going to be an issue whatsoever. Choking up, you're still being able to grip that jimping and get that good locked in position. So yeah, overall, I do really like the aluminum. One of the things that's nice about this are all the pops of color. The hardware, the embellishments is what I like to call them. So we have a blue pocket clip. You can see all of the blue anodized screws, but what's really neat about them, and hopefully I can catch this and get this focused, is the anodizing sort of brings a few different colors to the center of those screw heads. And that's neat. I think that looks cool. It gives it almost like a customized touch and feel. When I do mods and I do hardware, the hardware never quite looks exactly the same, and I think it gives it a nice touch, and I like that this knife has that as well. And if you look at the clip, actually, and you can sort of see it as I catch the light with it, it has these different colors of purple, beneath. So it's not just a set blue. It has a little bit more flair to it, which is nice. Right, as we continue to move on back, and we will talk about the assisted opening in just a second. As we continue to move on back, we do have a back spacer that protrudes a little bit from the scale, so you have a little bit of texturing here. We have a 2-position pocket clip. So on this side, you can see where the pocket clip would be flipped. and then you also have a small lanyard hole, which is I don't really think it's impeding too much with the carry of the knife. It doesn't need to be any deeper than it is, so that's a fine place. It's a small hole though, so just keep that in mind. You do also have filler screws for that filler tab, which is nice that there's not just holes sitting in at the scale, so they did think about that style of thing. Yeah, and then on the interior, we have full liners, and there is a little bit of machining that you'll see on both sides just to cut a little bit of weight. I don't think I went over the weight, and with the aluminum frame, and for a knife that is just not necessarily chunky, but it does have a thickness to it. It's not the thinnest knife in the world. For a knife of this size, a 4.01 ounce weight is pretty darn excellent. So yeah, I like that. You know, it feels good. It's not a heavy chunk, so the aluminum scale is definitely beneficial in that regard, and having those full liners for security is a positive note as well. So we talked about the steel as being one of the drawbacks, and the other thing that people don't like is assisted opening knives. Now, that's not all people. There's hopefully a ton of people watching this video right now who like assisted opening and like what CRKT does with it in this instance. So let's talk about that. So this is an assisted opening knife on IKBS, and the reason for that is it provides a really, really nice snap. So it's a good, solid assisted opening knife. You know, there's not like any kind of grit. It just feels super solid, and that's nice. Some people, I'm sure, would prefer to have the like the manual action on a knife like this. But what's interesting about CRKT, and I don't know how much of the things that they do you always want to refer to as innovative when they do something different. Maybe they're just thinking outside the box. Maybe they're just experimenting with stuff. But it's neat that they go the IKBS route and really try to make the best assisted opening knife that they can. You know, for the amount of like time and money that they put into making this on IKBS, they could have made it manual on different kind of washers, and they chose not to. This is the direction that they wanted to go. And I think that the assisted opening in this case is pretty darn cool. Now, one of the things about their new assisted opening method is that it's supposed to almost create a detent, in that when you close it, you don't need to close it all the way, because the way that the torsion bar is shaped, it will pull the knife in. That happens on this knife to some extent, but I'm going to bring back in the Tuedo, and Jesus, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Bring back in the Tuedo and show you that this knife has that like action where it sucks the blade in very differently than the Lanny. Almost preferred, I'd say, on the Tuedo. And one way that you can see that is, let's get both knives open, disengage both locks, right? So the Lanny drops free with zero resistance until we're at like the half stop point. The Tuedo, you have to push against that torsion bar like here, and then at this point, it's clear and it drops in. So that's sort of more of what I think that new assisted opening mechanism is shooting for. This one, you know, it doesn't have resistance at the start, and then it has pretty much resistance all the way to the end. Is that a big deal? No, it's something that if you aren't really paying attention to it with assisted opening knives, you might not even notice. You know, and so I think that if you're like really interested in the new system, or if you really like assisted knives, you'll, you know, want to check this out for that reason perhaps. But for the most part, I think it's just, you know, an assisted opening knife done well, and there's not too much that needs to be made about like the hoopla of the new mechanism. It's a good mechanism. It works just fine. It's nothing that's like going to make me do cartwheels, but it certainly isn't turning me off from buying the product. So there we have that. A big plus. A big plus when we talk about that action and these liners is the security of it. The lockup on this is flawless. It is really, really excellent. And that, guys, and you know, I've had a number of CRKTs that I didn't have a lot of positive things to say about, and that is certainly always one of the hot button items for me, is that lockup, and this knife really captures it well. Honestly, every CRKT for 2021 that I've held has been on point in terms of lockup, so I'm really excited about that. All right, so that is pretty much the gist of the components that you're getting with this knife. Now, the price point is sort of a big talking point. We're around like the $60 price point, so $60 to $64 on this one. And it might be 50, I think I might have seen it for like 58 somewhere, but then with shipping, you know, it's going to be in the $60 price point area. So competitively, that can make it tough. You know, and CRKT does some really good things. They make some great knives, and if you are just a materials person and you see 8CR13 MOV in aluminum, then you can see the Caligo from a couple years ago at like 30 something bucks and wonder, you know, why is this knife that much more expensive? Well, I mean, I'm not the guy to argue that. What I'm going to argue is that this is a well-made knife. It is a knife that if you want to pick one up and you make the investment, I think you're going to get a return on it. If you like the way that it looks, and you want a knife that looks a lot more expensive than it is, you know, and still is a good knife to use by every consideration that I have, like every metric that I need to measure, this would be a great knife to use for a long time. You know, I think that there's a good ROI when it comes to spending 60 something bucks on this. Again, if you're not an 8CR guy or you don't like assisted opening, you probably shouldn't even be watching at this point. You know, and we can have the debate in the comments about, oh, well, this knife is better for this price. Sure, but you're not going to get one that looks just like this anywhere else. So that's the draw. And this one is different. It looks good. I wish that more companies had more variety in just the way their knives looked. And yeah, I did some mods on this one. So, you know, but even the stock scale of that Heron and the stock here and here, like there's variety here. And that's what I think draws me into CRKTs. And I've got another one coming on the way that looks completely different from all of these. And that is a big thing when it comes to this company and the reason why I am always interested in what they do. So yeah, the Lanny for me is one that I'd love to keep this one. I'd love to beat this knife up personally and just get some wear on it. And I think it would look super cool with just some characteristics of, you know, a knife that's been used. And I think that it would definitely hold up in that regard as well. So definitely one that I would like to get back in my hands in the future and get into my collection at some point. Love Liang Ma's designs, and CRKT has definitely done a good job with this one. So any questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, let me know, guys. Really appreciate you watching. Take care and have a good one.